I said August might be quiet. It's not. Today I'm going to show you why August may well be ripping against the usual seasonal vibe. What has flipped under the hood and what am I positioning for the next leg up? I'm going to go a little bit deeper today. I'm going to do a lot of charts, a lot of analysis, a lot of psychology stuff. So if you like it, please do smash the like button. It means an awful lot. And yeah, let's get into it. So seasonal wise, August/September are usually the worst months for equities, right? That's kind of the obvious. It's also the worst for crypto, kind of ish. We'll get onto that in a bit. But the reality is quite simple. We have had some really interesting kind of bits of data, which we do need to talk about. And I've highlighted on the screen over the past 35 years, August, September have been ranked the worst, as you can imagine. So that's interesting. And the decline and all that kind of stuff is always interesting. It also goes on the fact of like the overall playbook that we do expect a bit of a flamingo in the sun sort of vibe where everyone's away and nothing really happens, which I understand it. But this August, we have had a lot of inflows on the ETFs in Bitcoin and obviously in the world of the Ethereum one, which is new, right? So we've got to look at that situation. And even when we talk about like situation like this, the S&P has surged 28% from its low since April, even though there's tariff-induced fear and recession elements and all kinds of noddy stuff, right? But that's what I mean. When we're talking about August, we knew straight away off the back of August, and we knew that there was going to be tariff kind of deadlines. That's kind of threw the thesis out the window, which is why I was probably wrong that we were going to get a bit of a lull. The data has changed, and so have I in senses, but I didn't really act upon the lull. I just kind of sat there and I wasn't taking anything off the table. I wasn't buying because there wasn't really anything to buy. Let's be honest, it didn't really go down low enough. So certainly interesting to know where we go next. And here we are. This is August. And even though there's a lot of people that will talk about how potentially the halving side of August is always okay, but realistically, that isn't enough kind of bones to kind of go for. Realistically, as much as you can see the pattern. The reality is, though, on average, August isn't a great month. Neither is September. But as I say, equities are also bad. But, you know, maybe that halving little bit of a twitch has kind of changed things. As you can imagine, this is just like the British weather. As soon as you look at the weather app and then you go outside, it's different things, isn't it? That's kind of what we've got today. Now, the word on the screen is choppy. And this is from a week or so ago, pretty much, right? And it's all talking about how the market has been. And it kind of is interesting that we are at all-time highs. We are looking at certain things. And even though we saw this, the stock market is just printing out a string of record closes into late July. The S&P has been risk on for a while, and that's obvious. And even with the fact of the cryptocurrency side of it, it's very, very interesting to note how everything's went really well, apart from obviously altcoins, right? Which we will talk about in a second. But again, we talk about the textbook idea of where does the price go? When does that liquidity come back into the market? When does the ETF's inflow fly? And we're starting to get it, even though, as you can imagine, the August lull is kind of there. So it is very, very interesting to note how we were going into this article like a couple of days later, the tariff deadline, and we did have a bit of a rumble. I know we're like 13 days after this article. We obviously had the rate cut elements as well involved in all this. So certainly interesting to see where the prices have been and where they're going. And now they're even higher than what they were, even though everything was choppy. Everything was at all-time highs. We had no real proper correction. It's very, very interesting. So the question is, what has sort of flipped and changed all this? And let's talk about the ETF inflow, because the BTC ETFs have been pretty remarkable over the last couple of months anyways, regardless, right? We'll talk about Ethereum in a second. But as you can see on the screen, from the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th of August, it has got stronger, stronger, stronger. And it's indicating, again, real demand. And we've had that situation where we had a bit of a pullback where money kind of rotated out and then it's gone back in again. But again, we can talk about the obvious in the room here. This is just continuously just going up. The demand is still there. And yes, we can talk about 4-year cycles and all kinds of stuff and liquidity backdrops and all kinds of weird and wonderful stuff. But ultimately, we've got to look at the obvious in the room here. There's demand here, proper demand, which is also eking into Ethereum, which we do need to talk about. So the Ethereum side has got stronger, 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 which is good. It's finally happening. And you can see that the amount of inflows over the course of time has obviously gradually increased. And you could see it was really slow for a long, long time. Then it kind of washed up and then it went down for a while. And then it's gone really aggressive up. And that's kind of obvious. And this is kind of given us Ethereum season vibes. We'll talk about rotation in a bit. But the sad reality is we haven't had that rotation just yet of full-on liquidity going into the world of other altcoins. And, the flows don't care too much about the bias of August. They care about where the money is going today. And that's the reality where we are right now. So money into Ethereum, the dominance of Ethereum going from 7% up to 12% again is a good solid sign. Still not quite there yet. We need to have that rotation. We'll talk about that in a second, where we're going to go from Bitcoin into Ethereum, Ethereum into large caps into micro caps, or well, mid caps into the micro caps, small caps, right? That hasn't happened yet, and it hasn't happened for a very, very long time, which is why I think a lot of people are really fatigued with the world of why the market in terms of altcoins, psychological elements have been really, really hard to kind of get over. Even when we look at the backdrop of, as you can imagine, a very lullish period in altcoins, and more importantly, where the backdrop is of said liquidity, which we will come on to now. Now, one thing that is happening, and it's kind of obvious, is the stable coin float is still grinding up, and it's still at new all-time highs, obviously, because this is kind of an inflation model, really, where we do get money printed goes burr. And it keeps going up and up and up. And as you can see here, the 7-day change is another 2.39 billion added, which is fair enough. And it has just hit a 3-year high at the end of July. Risk appetite isn't dead. You got to remember, this market is very different to the last market. You've got to look at the obvious in the room of like pump fund sort of stuff, and the casino of Solana and how many coins he is now versus what there was. Stable currencies are like fuel gauges. When the tank keeps filling up, you don't plan a road trip and drive away, do you? Let's be honest. But again, you can see where the power plays are. It is still Tether. It's still USD coin. But that's just the reality of it. That is still going to grow, grow, grow. But look at number 3. Look at the change. Look at the changes in terms of liquidity in the market cap there on an Ethereum-based token. By the way, I just want to address the comment section. I know, you're all lurking. But I've been pretty bullish for a while, but I always get like really weird kind of messages saying I'm bearish. And I don't quite understand it, considering the last amount of videos that I've done have been relatively bullish. Most of them. Let's be honest here. I've been talking about the next leg. I've been talking about alt season reignited. Altcoins are winning. Did you miss them? Genuinely, did you miss them? So it's time to go into the analysis. We might well be on the path of A right now, where we're going down, which is fine, which we kind of somewhat expected, really. But I'm still a bit mindful that this is not going to just puke on its own. It still looks relatively strong, kind of ish, on the higher time frame, such as a weekly. We've been in situations before where we have pulled back quite a lot, quite aggressively, and then we've bounced again, right? So if Bitcoin does hold up while dominance is stalling or rolling over, altcoins may well get a little bit of a move. And I mentioned that in one of my videos not too long ago, where a quiet market for Bitcoin is a good market for altcoins. Again, you probably missed it. It's one of those things. So as much as like this market is very, very different, i.e. the lower the market is different, the fact that this has gone up higher for longer and has really caught people off guard, which is fair enough, we are expecting still, I think, an altcoin lag for a lot of the market. Now, what do I mean by a lot of the market, i.e. everything? Not just, you're going to get the obvious run, but ultimately, your coin that's ranked 999,999 is probably not going to move anywhere. By the way, if you want more information, more of what I do, journals, trades, analysis, more videos, Discord, all for that price, just jump in. So yeah, as we can look back at this and look at the obvious in the room, I feel like we are going to go down, but the ultimate question, and we could talk about this in multiple videos, is how low do we go? What is a rotation like? What is the Ethereum rotation, which we will come on to, like? What will XRP do? What will Cardano do? What will BNB do? They all need to rise massively in dominance. But again, there's so many variations of this. As I said before, though, in previous cycles, and a little bit of psychology here, the drops are very aggressive. They're horrible. And the rises were also pretty aggressive too, where this is a lot longer. This has felt worse, in my opinion. And if you did miss Bitcoin, totally, I know a lot of people did, you're probably in a lot of pain, especially if you're still in altcoins and you are praying and praying and praying for that altcoin run to happen, which it may well be happening, but it may also be very, very selective. You might be in Ethereum. You might have missed Ethereum as well. What about if you did miss the top 10 or the top 20? Oh my God, that'd be horrendous. But the drops are massively aggressive, and we haven't had that situation. So even though people are like really, really begging for it and like clutching a little bit, we haven't really had that trigger to go yet. And it will become apparent what I mean in this video, so stick around. So as I alluded to before, and I did a little clip about this on X, that Ethereum hit 2019, 2020 levels, and we bounced off the bottom of it, fair enough. And now we're at levels of nearly 13%, which is good to see. but it needs to continue going higher, and it needs to rotate back into other altcoins as well to enable the strength of the altcoin confidence to come back. Now, the ultimate question is, where does Ethereum need to go in terms of the entire market for retail people to come back, or more importantly, existing people to go, oh, I bought Ethereum back in 2017, 2018, I lost a lot of money, I'm coming back, sort of vibe, right? Because that could probably happen as well. Even though people have been wrecked, I still think people will probably come back because they're greedy. So that situation's huge, but this is a really big run. And even on the monthly time frame, it's like, oh my God. So horrible. So yeah, it's looking a bit better, but again, you can argue a couple of things. It may well start to stumble at some point soon, but it depends on the rotation. What will happen next? I don't know. It is a really interesting point to note how strong Ethereum has been in the recent weeks, but will that just like fall off in a whimper? Are we getting a bit overconfident? Are we getting cocky? What's happening with the Ethereum bag holders? Are they going to, as I say, rotate into other chain, like projects like Chainlink, for example, Ethereum-led projects, DeFi projects, make a DAO, Curve, whatever. So it is very interesting. But right now, huge key level, needs to get above it. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you'll know that this is a fantastic chart to look at and be involved in, which is obviously USDT and all the other stable currencies dominance, because leaving cash in stables is kind of the big kind. I wouldn't say it's alpha, but it's definitely something to watch, because what this does is it kind of showcases how existing liquidity, which is on the sidelines, stables, goes into the market. And overall, you can kind of see why it was so high here, why Bitcoin is a lot higher now. And also levels like this is where we've had many little alt seasons where money has rotated in. We need this to go down. Firstly, we need to go back down to 5%. Simple as that. We also need to go and readdress some levels down here. As you probably know, if you're on the channel, if you've been subscribing, you'll know that these are very important levels to watch. So when I trade or when I like market myself into a position, I always look at what is this doing. So I'm still in the market spot, very much 99% of my stuff, and I play around with futures for a bit of a laugh, and I get a bit of profit here and there, right? Just for laughs and giggles, right? But I don't go against this, so to speak. I always like to be in the right side of this because this is the one. And then you can kind of draw upon conclusions around other side of it, which I will showcase, because we need to also look at rotation, which is obviously others/BTC. This needs to go up before anything. And this is what this box is there for. For me, going above this level and changing character and changing the structure of this market entirely as an index against Bitcoin itself is going to be the one that goes, hold on a minute, we've got proper rotation. What's happening? We're going moving. So people were disappointed with like the previous moves. And I talked about the previous moves in this period. If you go back to the channel, we did this and we failed completely. But it was very much led by XRP, Hedger, Hashgraph, and all them kind of assets alone, right? With obviously the inauguration of Trump and the change of policy and whatnot. So that was important. Again, we can talk about the exact same thing in others.D, which is others/dominance. Again, same sort of situation, how some of these big moves happen, and we got a lot of profit here in terms of this move, and I did it on a couple of my assets, which is quite nice. But we need to get that rotation. We need to kind of argue, you could argue, maybe moving this down a little bit now, where we're looking at certain situations where we need to break above this level and get a clean break and a structure kind of reset, and off we go. Because realistically, it needs to reclaim the bullish trend. It needs to hold the higher lows, and it needs to get that rotation beyond Ethereum, not just Ethereum itself, which is becoming a bit of a pain in the ass. And again, when we talk about other market participants, what is BNB.D doing? Even though it's an all-time high in the likes of the USD pair, it kind of is still very much low here. Likewise with my bet, which is Solana. If you follow me on Patreon, I'm doing a dollar cost average challenge with Bitcoin and Solana. I'm buying every single Sunday. We're going to see what happens, see if we can grow some wealth there. But I personally firmly believe that Solana at 2.48% of the market is tiny when you consider the market participation on the casino side of it and how many altcoins could really run if we get retail mania, for example. And if we're looking at the overall grand scheme of the market, total 3/BTC, for example, this is not looking great, but ultimately we can argue, well, if we break above, let's just move that down a little bit, break above there and change character, which obviously a change of character can be a bit of a pain in the ass sometimes, which I will explain on some random altcoins in a bit. It could be very interesting to see where we go from here, but this again has to go up. We are very much in resistance, undervalued territory for a lot of things because we're so low. Doesn't mean you missed the boat, but you may not find bottoms. But there may be a lot of upside if we get the rotation. Bitcoin into Ethereum, which is somewhat happening. Is Ethereum going to rotate into the other bigger cap coins? That is what we need next. And I know this chart is a mess. I do apologize, but we're going to talk Bitcoin because this is my overall thesis. Now, this little level here, we're going to talk about certain things where we've had change of characters on a lot of things and we've kind of been snookered by the front runner of the ETFs, you can argue. Now, we went back into this zone here, which is what we were expecting, and that was quite obvious if you've been watching my analysis, especially on Patreon. But I wasn't expecting us to make a new high here. Personal opinion, I'm just going to say it. We are at a new all-time high because we've actually closed above this level for once. Hey! So we kind of zipped up at this point and we died. We're now much, much higher and we're sustaining that point, which is fantastic, right? We are holding nicely on the base. Now, again, we went a little bit bearish for a couple of days, but then we've gone back bullish. That's fine. But the overall grand scheme of things are looking relatively good. But in my personal opinion, I think we've got a bit of a fib perception. I think we are going to go between 156,000, 209,000, in between this big arty box here as the next leg. This is kind of the target points I've got. So if you want to make note of them, you can. It's up to you, obviously. I'm not going to pressure you. But for me, I think Bitcoin will probably do a 10x this cycle. That's kind of the thing. From 15K to 150,000 is kind of where I'm aiming. I know a lot of people in the comment section will be like, what? Is that it? I think 10x is more than enough, in my opinion. But it depends whether we're going to get that altcoin rotation, which is what people are probably begging for. If you are interested in trading, Blowfin offers no KYC and also open to the UK for all you UK people who are struggling to do any sort of trading. It also offers 20% back on fees, which is pretty important. But the main headline we need to talk about is obviously Ethereum. We've broken this multi-year resistance level, which is quite important. Everything's just tuning up. We'll look at the Ethereum BTC pair as well, but it's kind of obvious here. Let's be honest. If you go to the weekly time frame, it's even more obvious. We're not that far away from all-time high, and I think we're going to break it very, very soon, in my opinion. I would love this to be a really aggressive repricing, and I hope it is, because the amount of times we've been smashed at this level, we need it to just go. Once it gets towards all-time high, it then will probably get even more aggressive, especially when you combine it with the ETF inflows and all kinds of stuff like that. It is very, very, very important. The sad reality is, though, we've been here a few times before and we have been burned, so we just need to be mindful of like going all in. Because as you know, if you go towards the resistance, there's a good chance of getting burned, especially in this market. The reason why I say that, a lot of late longs, a lot of late shorts get absolutely bludgeoned. And that's just the tail of this market, because if Bitcoin has a bit of a sneeze at these all-time high levels, you're going to find a bit of an issue. As I've alluded to before in previous videos, this is the Ethereum BTC chart, which looks a bit ugly, and we are well and truly on our way towards some much better, healthier, nicer price points, this has been on my charts for a long, long time now. But the sad reality is, sorry, but we need to talk about this. The aggressive reprice from these lows to this level here of a nice 5x in BTC, we may not get there this time around, potentially, if we're looking at certain levels. And obviously, if we're going to pull it from the all the way down, we're going to miss out potentially on some kind of moves. But ultimately, you're only going to be entering at certain points here. You're never going to just go fully aping into. Obviously, maybe the bottom is obviously in. But we talk about diminishing returns, talk about how this can be quite a nice repricing. But there has been a lot of posts about Ethereum going to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, which blows my brains a little bit, to be honest with you. So trying to get too aggressive with it, because realistically, if we're going to go towards 6,000 sats, which is going to be a nice repricing, but it may only be $10,000 to $12,000 Bitcoin, Ethereum, sorry, which will probably mean that the total two is not going to be scary numbers, but it depends on how many altcoins move. Obviously, there's a massive kind of gap between what altcoins are doing versus what Bitcoin's doing. Obviously, you can see with the chart, this is very, very different versus this. This is obviously minus Bitcoin. However, it just kind of marries up with how the overall sentiment of the market is in terms of altcoins and what we were expecting. But hey, it is what it is, unfortunately, and they are growing, but it's not the best indicator in the world with the amount of altcoins, the amount of emissions. It's just the way it is. And when we talk about bull market sort of vibes and rotation, we've got to look at the factor of the dollar. The dollar is still somewhat dropping. It's looking a bit ugly. Realistically, could go even lower. But we've also got the S&P 500 at new all-time highs. You know, that's kind of obvious. Even the Dow Jones index is almost at all-time highs here. So there still is at risk on capital across the globe here. That is still a very, very big plus. But as I said before in a lot of videos, the only thing that hasn't got a tick in the box right now is the altcoin market, which psychological elements of it hurts. And we are going to talk about altcoins in more specific terms. I'm going to cover a couple of them. I'm going to showcase why it's been quite hard to analyze them because they have been doing obvious TA, but they've been rotating against you massively. Insert altcoin here kind of vibe of everything looking a bit choppy. And it's been like this for a long time now. If you've been watching my channel, I got a really good move on a lot of these upsides, and we had a big correction. You could probably argue an ABC correction. Full on change your character on a lot of things. We kind of deviated really low and then back up. Normally, you'd expect it kind of not to be as strong at these points, and kind of caught a lot of people off guard. And literally, every altcoin did a similar sort of move where it didn't really follow the trend as strongly. In the downtrend, it kind of just rotated back into the highs very, very aggressively, which is a really, really, really solid sign. But that's what my problem is with this market right now. It's very, very choppy, and you can see this on Cardano, how indecisive it's been for a long time. There's no real proper trends going on. Like, there's a couple, but not enough, right? Not really a vibrant one that kind of makes you follow. But even with the likes of this, right, going from the low to the high, and yeah, you can argue going into that zone here. But realistically, looking at this area, there's enough there to kind of get you kind of started. But it's more the fact of how much and how aggressively they bounce after a bit of a lull and then just go randomly crazy. Because normally what would happen with the sentiment of the crypto market, which is important, by the way, you'd see stuff like this and you see it like that. You'd see a lot of people bidding on the fact that this is going to fail at these levels. It didn't this time, which is mad. So it's a really strong sign, but it's a really odd sign that I don't like, because even with the likes of Chainlink, for example, right? This did that. A very, very aggressive move. And I got a really good trade on the upside on Chainlink here. Big correction all the way down. That's an aggressive correction. And then a huge correction to the upside. So stuff like this has been quite hard to kind of gauge and kind of trade realistically, even though this has been trading a little bit better. But again, we look at the BTC pair. Look at that. That is an absolute monstrosity of a move. So it has been a much harder market to read, and the whole element around the network effect and the ETF vibe and stuff like that, especially around certain things, especially Ethereum-led tokens, is giving us a vibe. And let's talk about the likes of Solana. Now, I am in a trade on Solana. I'm looking to just punt it long to the upside, wherever this can go for a laugh. Again, similar sort of vibe. We had an obvious lower high. We had a bit of a trend up. We've had a deviation, lower high going into it. Full on change of character vibe. Full on like, oh my God, this is probably going to change trends. Are we going to continue going higher? Now, look at how non-aggressive this is realistically. Is this going to fail and go lower? Unlikely, especially given the BTC pair isn't doing too bad, but it could be a lot better. But what if that rotation just goes flick, bong? Because my overall sentiment around this trade alone is not so much on technical analysis, on sentiment based. The sentiment of it being, is Ethereum money going to rotate into the likes of Solana? And that side of it, or is a certain amount of retail going to come back and go into the market and go, wow, this is mental. Wow, Solana, let's go into the casino of Solana and use Phantom Wallet, Jupiter, whatever. And that flies off because, again, we zoom out on the likes of Solana and go to like the 3-day time frame or something like that. This gets some aggressive moves, and it probably could do very, very well. Likewise with most other things, likes of Litecoin, for example, is another one that can lead packs. Hasn't really shown it for a while, but it has been recently doing quite an aggressive kind of run. And again, we're at new highs here. We're going to go and break up, potentially retest yearly highs and maybe break structure and go towards where it was in the previous cycle. That's kind of a big stretch, I know, but it is the reality of it. Likewise with stuff like Hedra Hashgraph here, where this has been a bit of a concrete pillar for a while and now we're breaking above it. Again, we zoom out, we could be going much higher. It's one of those things where things are going quite aggressive, they are pulling back and then they're popping off. Again, go to the daily time frame, you can see how ugly it kind of is and how choppy it is and how people have been cut to bits. That's just the sad reality of it. Same with the likes of Curve. Again, a big, massive, aggressive push to the upside, really kind of just died off a little bit. Pull back, change of character, thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen here? But we may well be going back up again, potentially. Or if it totally fails, depending on Ethereum, could be very much hard work. So we're in that situation where some altcoins are doing really well and some altcoins are like really undecided where they want to go next. But the Ethereum kind of rotation could be massively key here. So yeah, there's massive plans ahead here for like what could be happening. But again, it's that same situation. What's going to happen with the rotation? Is it going to come? Is it not? And even like your obvious retailish coins, such as like Dogecoin, sorry, absolutely massively pivotal on that area. Pulled back quite aggressively, but ultimately bounced quite hard. You know, realistically, it's still looking pretty good so far. But if Bitcoin goes for a run and hold at these levels and goes even higher, people may rotate back into like Ethereum, and Ethereum gets to a certain point. So say if Ethereum goes towards all-time high, there's more headlines and people may return and go, oh, I bought Dogecoin in like 2021. I want to go back. Boom. But in terms of psychology-wise, I was definitely wrong regarding the lull. I was expecting a bit of a more chilled August, which it may well still happen. There's only been 11 days, obviously, but there's definitely been a lot more opportunities than I expected, and that's kind of the situation. And when we talk about discipline and psychological elements, right, a lot of people blow up their accounts by being married to a narrative, and that was kind of me in a way. Past data doesn't equal future performance, and we've got to kind of read what the market gives us. But explaining before in terms of how the altcoin market kind of threw wobbly, as in it did offer change characters, it did aggressive pullbacks, and it just kind of bounced very much quickly. That seasonal element isn't probability. It's, you know, well, it is a probability realistically, but it's not a prophecy, right? So to speak. So it's not going to always happen. This is what I think people get confused in the comments. If you look at like question marks and statements and titles and whatever, we are still using probability. We're still speculating, right? We're not gambling. We're not kind of doing stuff like that, but we are basically speculating that realistically what could be happening here. The altcoin rotation may well be one step away from Ethereum going into the altcoin market, which could give us huge evidence that the ETF's flipping positive for the likes of, you know, Ethereum, whatever it may be. And as you can argue that this has gone up so aggressively, that money is expanding and going into the dominance of Ethereum, which is again why you need to kind of pivot and change your bias a little bit and not go too crazy. Even though I don't hold Ethereum, even though I don't hold altcoins and I trade them for fun and I'm holding other things for more speculative bets, I'm still a massive Bitcoin holder. I still believe that Bitcoin's going to go even higher, which we will talk about the next leg. But realistically, what we do need for the entire ecosystem, the entire cryptocurrency market, we need Ethereum to do something too, because it hasn't been pulling its weight for the last couple of years. We all know that. So the whole idea is to plan instead of predict, and you know, keep looking at your core exposure. Are you enough risk on? Do you have to tighten up certain things? Have you got really bad portfolio assets that are kind of not working out for you? Psychologically, you need to kind of make those decisions and go on the stronger bets. And in my viewpoint, and you know, feel free if you're in the comments and you've got certain altcoins. If you're looking at altcoins and they're not reacted at any point during the fact of the entire market move or the moves recently, you should probably go and redo your research and have a little look, because if you are looking at BTC ripping and the dominance changes and USD.D goes down because liquidity is flowing into the market, are they going into your assets? Are they going into your altcoins? So that's a huge factor as well for discipline. So keep an eye on it. So yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting where we go next, because in my viewpoint, the next leg up is all about Bitcoin currently and also Ethereum. Their net inflows have to stay positive. The stable currency market, as I've alluded to, has to keep on dropping in terms of dominance, because that would indicate existing liquidity is getting put back into that market, which is hugely important. That's what I will say. Now, again, we could talk about a lot of different variations and stuff like that, but as I said before, this going lower is huge for risk on environment. And that is kind of the whole vibe here. You should be risk on when this is going down. You should be risk off when it's going up. And obviously OTHERS.D and stuff like that, it needs to stop making those lows. It needs to carry on going up higher and return higher. If those reverse, just don't be a hero. Like, let's be honest here, because it could be very, very interesting to see where we go next. So yeah, let me know in the comments, where do you think Bitcoin's going next? And will Ethereum also, during this time, break the all-time high, which it should be. So yeah, if this video has helped you, please do smash a like button on it, and let's push it out to other feeds so it gets more and more eyeballs. And yeah, if you want to join my Patreon or my Discord, which is a free link below, and anyways, I will be doing altcoin analysis tomorrow. I will be getting a load of people's altcoins and we'll do a full deep dive of them and we'll see what could be rotating next and what could be going up higher. But yeah, if you've not yet done so, please do watch this video here. This will help you understand where the exit of all exits could be in this market.